Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of OSDIA Live. Joining me is one of my favorite Italian Americans, Bob Bianchi. Bob, how are you?
I'm doing great, Lisa. Thank you for that.
Well, I only speak the truth here. We have Justin Smith. He is zooming in from Washington. Justin, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
And our guest of honor is, we all know him, especially around Sons of Italy, Hollywood legend Joe Mantegna, and he's also a dear friend of Sons of Italy. Joe, calling in from LA, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much, Lisa.
So how are you doing during this pandemic? I know that every plan you probably had has been thwarted.
Yeah, you know, actually, I was supposed to be in Italy right now, to tell you the truth. I was supposed to be doing, because I do a show, I used to do the show Criminal Minds, as people may know, but I also had a show called, I've been doing a show for 9 years called Gun Stories, where we trace historical firearms all around the world, and the history of it. And we were going to go to the Beretta factory, among places, in Brescia. And obviously that got canceled due to the current events, but you know, things will improve. I'll get back there, but otherwise I'm doing pretty good. I mean, we're doing fairly well here in California. I feel pretty blessed that my lifestyle is not, you know, too risky. So my family and I we're doing well.
That's good. How about professionally? Because I know productions all over the country are still shut down. For the
moment. Well, as it turned out, I mean, the timing actually worked for me. I mean, in the sense that after 15 seasons of Criminal Minds, that show ended. But I have done a new show now, a pilot for Amazon. The title is still yet to be determined, but it's a wonderful show. It deals with young people actually on the autism spectrum. It's based on a show out of Israel called On the Spectrum. It's about 3 young adults who live together, and I play the father of one of them. It's created by the Jason Katims, who created Parenthood and Friday Night Lights, wonderful shows. So we'll start production on that soon, sometime soon. I mean, I know the series has been picked up. It's just a matter of, you know, when Hollywood figures the best safe and sane way for everybody to go back into production. But they're working on it now, and I have a feeling sometime in the next month or two, you know, things will start to happen.
Well, congratulations on that. Bob, I know you have a lot of questions coming from the criminal perspective.
Yeah, mine are really from the production piece and as well as criminal. Joe, as we talked off air, I'm a national TV legal analyst and I host a legal show. And I know actually some of the folks that you worked with on Criminal Minds. I'm curious, like, to what extent in the production world are those folks helping you guys in order to produce a show? What kind of information are they giving you, and is it really valuable to you?
It's totally valuable. I mean, it's invaluable because, first of all, because we represent a real organization. I mean, there's a lot of TV shows that are about fictitious kinds of things, you know, but we are the behavior analysis unit of the FBI. There is such a unit. I've been to Quantico numerous times, in fact, initially for research. And then even on my show Gun Stories, I've gone there for that because they have obviously an incredible collection of historical firearms. But their input is really invaluable because, first of all, many of the stories that we did 325 episodes of Criminal Minds ultimately. Many of those episodes were based on real cases of the FBI. Now, some, you know, some of course were fictionalized, or some where you tweak them a little bit for the sake of television, whatever. But we were always, it was very important for us to be as honest and truthful and as respectful in the sense of what these men and women really do, because you don't want to give the impression of like, oh, well, this is what their job is like, but yet you're so far afield from that it's not really true. And so their input was invaluable because, and in talking to the real FBI agents, I think they appreciated our show in the sense that we weren't like a soap opera. Some people even, you know, they would not complain about it, but they would say, boy, your show is so gritty and so disturbing at times. And I would always defend it by saying it has to be, because we're honoring the men and women who really do that job, and we can't sugarcoat it. In other words, this is what they have to face. So no, people say, doesn't it freak you out? I go, no, it doesn't at all, because it just gives me respect for the men and women who really have to do that.
Yeah, and Joe, as a follow-up to that, you know, what I have found interesting, at least when I've done documentaries and things like that, is that the truth and the real way that things go on sometimes are more fascinating to me, or are more fascinating than the fictional shows that you show.
Without question.
You know, it brings up, it's like you almost wish you could have a camera with you all the time when you're in a courtroom or when you're on a crime scene to show how it really goes down.
Oh yeah, without question. I even remember when I was doing research on the movie I did called Homicide, a David Mamet film in Baltimore many years ago. And I had to work with real homicide detectives in the city of Baltimore. And they brought what they basically called their murder book, which is all the photos of things. And they said, oh, hope you're ready for this if you really want to know what our job is like. I says, no, I get it. And they showed me things and explained things to me that made me realize, yeah, there's nothing you could fictionalize that's weirder or crazier or more horrific than what these people really have to deal with. And that's why I have such tremendous respect for them, and why it was important on our show to be as truthful and as kind of as possible.
Excellent.
How did real life events influence some of the storylines?
Well, somewhat. I mean, you know, some shows were really like shows like Law and Order, I think, and stuff like that would almost look at the tabloids every week and really jump on it, stuff like that. Sometimes you couldn't help but do things like that. But the scope of the FBI and the amount of cases that they've had in their history is so vast that it wasn't so much that we have to really worry so much about current events as there were of just, you know, things that had occurred whenever they had happened, and tell that story. But sometimes it would be influenced by what was going on. But there's such a lead time and such a lag time between when you shoot something and then when it ultimately airs, and also because things are going to air again reruns years later. Sometimes you can't get you can't expect things to kind of dovetail exactly as maybe for the most effect. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. So I want to take a look at your career just from a wider lens, because as I introduced, you are a Hollywood legend. You have been constantly working for decades. How have you managed to stay so relevant in such an otherwise volatile industry?
I don't know. I mean, I think part of it may be my dear Italian mother who passed away at 101, just about less than 2 years ago. She had a great life, and she died. I mean, and she never got sick. She just basically went to sleep and didn't wake up. But I remember at her funeral, at the eulogy, my brother, who was 8 years older than I am, got up and spoke first, and he says, my brother Joey doesn't even know this. He says, but when he got his show, when he got cast on Criminal Minds, and you got to understand, at that point, I'd already been an actor for close to 40 years at that point. He says, when he got the job, my mother called him, and she said, Ronnie, I'm worried about Joey. And my brother says, why? And she says, he's only working an hour a week. And it made me understand. That's kind of what my mother's perception of show business was like. She never really quite understood what I did for a living. And in a way, I think it was good. I think it humbled me in the sense of made me feel, look, if my own mother doesn't really quite understand what I do, how can I feel like such a big shot or take this so seriously? I took my work very seriously, but I've always felt that what I do is just in conjunction with what everybody else does. When I work on a show, to me, the extras, the guy, the sound guy, the driver, the makeup girl, the costume girl, we all have the equal kind of a job, but just I'm the face of it. I'm that guy that's doing that. So all I try to do is just, in my whole career, just kind of, put it out there. I've been blessed to make a career out of what I started doing in high school and liked doing. And that's all it is. I mean, beyond that, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I feel just very blessed that it has worked out. But when I think any times when I start to feel a little too full of myself, I would think, hey, I remember when I won the Tony Award back in 1984, when I explained it to my mother never quite got it. And she would always tell people, yeah, my son Joey won the Oscar, but for plays. And it was like, okay, and it's just as well. I think that all worked out. So my career is outside of my immediate family. I think it's been pretty good in terms of people, appreciating what I do, which is great.
It reminds me of my Italian grandmother. My grandparents are from Calabria, and because growing up, I wanted to be on TV, but obviously, as I came of age, everything went digital. So they don't understand that why most of my work is based on the digital side of things.
Right.
So big a deal. You're on the computer. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
but that's where
exactly.
I make my
Yeah.
money.
Right, exactly. They don't get it. Yeah. And there was one instance in particular. I'm actually and it ties in with this organization with I used to say OSDIA, but I can't say it now because I got to put the D in there. And so, which is great that we do that now. But I remember I was doing a series when I first started hosting the convention in Washington, D.C. about 18 years ago, I think, and I've been doing this. I was on a show then called First Monday, which was about the Supreme Court. And I played this Italian member of the Supreme Court, and I made his name Joseph Novelli, and I named it after my grandfather. And I made sure the character was Italian. And we did one episode that was my suggestion. I asked them to write this episode, and we shot it. It was an episode where it was all about me being an Italian American. And at the end of the episode, it was with James Garner and myself, and I stood on the steps of what was supposedly the Supreme Court and gave the speech about how, because some senator was trying to maybe defame my because I was Italian American, that maybe there was some, mafia connections in my background. And I give the speech on the steps about how, the whole thing about Italian Americans and about 99%, 0.9999, you're trying to use one minuscule kind of percentage to try to defame a whole, a nationality because of it. And it was just so great. And I was so grateful to have had that opportunity to shoot that episode, which kind of summed up, that whole thing. And it's why I've chosen to make so many of my characters Italian American, including the one on Criminal Minds, including the one on Joan of Arcadia, including the one in the movie I did, Woody Allen film. I made him an Italian American. Another film, State of Emergency, which they built the series ER around. I made him an Italian American. I do that on purpose to show, I'm not ashamed that I play characters like Joey Zaza on The Godfather or Fat Tony, and I said, because these are like, okay, they're characters, you play them. But on the other hand, I also want to show, then let's show that doctors, lawyers, Supreme Court judges, detectives, FBI members are also Italian Americans. Let's balance the scales, that there's no, nationalities are not descriptive about how people are, and I'm just so proud of our heritage, in particular. And so anyway.
Yeah.
Joe, I was thinking of when you're saying that, a couple of things just came to mind. First of all, I've met you a couple of times at the NELAs where you support, our events. And what's always struck me about your personality to me in the small time that I've had to speak with you is your humility, which you just addressed. And I think that that's an amazing takeaway for people. Many people of power or money or fame I've seen, and I've been in positions of high level power, have become very arrogant and disrespectful to people. So I really appreciate that. But to your point on discrimination, I have two things. I was at a Sons and Daughters of Italy convention in Chicago years ago. And my Irish wife was telling me, I think you Italians are crazy about discrimination and prejudice. And we were in a bar area and it was really filled. And there was a guy, I had the red, white, and green badge on, Sons of Italy. And I went up to him with my wife and I said, hey, where are you from? And he was from the Midwest somewhere. I said, let me ask you a question. How many people do you believe that are Italian American are involved in organized crime? And he kind of looks at my badge and goes, I know what you think I'm going to say, that it's 100%, but it's probably more like 99%. And he's dead serious.
Oh my God.
And my last story with that, I'm just interested in your commentary about discrimination that Italians have gone through, which is always sotto voce, if you will, with regard to everything else going on in the world. Well, my father was being nominated by the governor to be the banking commissioner of New Jersey back in 1978. That's not too long ago. When the four-way interviews were being done, that's the police checks that were being done, every Italian American was challenged by the state troopers to be told that we have reasons to believe you have connections to organized crime.
Yeah.
Later, they apologized for that, but it was a way of them trying to see how the person would respond to it. And that was only a couple of years ago, Joe. And I think it still goes on.
Yeah, it does. I mean, all I can say is that's what we do what you can do and just set a good example and all that. And it's all about education, the way I feel. I feel so many of our problems are based on that. You're not going to change the minds and the ways of people who are set in their ways that are. So my feeling is focus on the kids. make sure that they're educated right from the start, from the first day they go to school. All kids from all nationalities, all races, and everything. That to let them understand. Look, we're all in this together. This planet is only so big, and we all have our aspects to it, and we all. Every nationality, every race, everybody's contributing something, and we should just try to be positive in all the things that we do. We all got. Thank God we have Italians. At least the food end of it, we're picking up very well, let alone entertainment. Thank God for Sinatra and that group.
Are we allowed to say that in the food sector we just cannot be competed with? Is that a fair?
As far as I'm concerned, I feel that way, but I could be a little prejudiced.
But, well, I'll take that a step further because I'm sure you've been to New York and New Jersey plenty of times. Does the LA food match up to the food on the East Coast?
Well, look, we haven't been here as long. Let's put it that way. But it's a lot better. I mean, I've lived in California a long time now, and it's gotten a lot better. But partly because you have a lot of New Yorkers who live here, a lot of Chicagoans live here. They come up. It's hard to find a native Californian, sometimes, which is fine. But sure, of course, nothing beats, the whatever, most people's hometowns, though. Sometimes I'll be surprised you'll go into some little town. I mean, just there's a great Italian deli just like in this small town Chatsworth here outside Los Angeles. But you go in there and you think you're in some little town in Puglia or something, because it's a great deli and the guys there are very Italian that own it. And it's wonderful, and so you find your little pockets wherever it may be. But food's gotten a lot better here.
Lisa, I have to put Joe on the spot now since we're on the food thing.
I know what you're gonna ask.
I ask everybody. It's the trickiest question known to mankind. It causes lots of controversy. Joe, I want to know: gravy or sauce?
Gravy.
My man.
That's Chicago. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know how that breaks down and why it could be an age thing too. I mean, Lisa, you're a lot younger than I am. Back in the days, it was gravy, and I think the hardcore guys, it's gravy, and maybe it's starting to fade away now. I don't know. But we got to keep gravy.
You got to keep it going.
I was raised by my Italian grandparents. I'm half Sicilian, half Calabrese. Gravy is the sauce with meat in it. But if there's no meat, it's sauce.
Lisa, once you have to start justifying it, you're losing the argument.
I never said pasta though either. It was always macaroni, right? I mean, I don't know if we know it. Pasta was like a fancy word to us.
Yeah, macaroni.
It was always like macaroni. Who put the macaroni on? We got throw some gravy on the macaroni. That was.
Joe, are you all Sicilian or you're half?
No, I'm half Sicilian on my father's side, and I'm half Barese on my mother's side. And like I said, I'm very close to my family, especially outside Bari. My company is called Acquaviva Productions that I've had for about 40 years now. And it's named after the town outside Bari that side of my family's from, my mother's side. The town is called Acquaviva della Fonte, just outside Bari. And I've been there numerous times, and I'm very close to my relatives there. And so they're a big part of my life. And so I'm half Barese, half Sicilian, which growing up was like a mixed marriage in some areas between my mother and my father. But I get that. I mean, I understand. They were very different personality types, but that's the whole thing. Sometimes opposites attract, and I think that worked with my parents.
Yeah, my Sicilian side, they're like a different life form.
Oh yeah. The Sicilian side on my side was very kind of, and the Barese side where like everybody thought they were Dean Martin.
No.
I was glad I got to play him eventually, which was great.
See, I would have thought you would have gotten your dramatic side from your Sicily.
Oh, I think it might be a little of both. I mean, I think there's certainly some of the characters I've played have a lot of that Sicilian going for them.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, can I just ask just a serious question?
Yeah.
Getting to Italian pride, and I'm not asking for commentary on the politics of what's going on with Columbus and the statutes and
right.
that, but can you explain, at least in your world, what it is, why it is that the Italian Americans have looked towards Columbus as being a great person? Not the controversy going on now, but the reasons why he became emblematic of the Italian people.
Well, I mean, just the fact that, I mean, we've been taught, at least when I was a little kid, I mean, there was the story that these explorers went out We have to give it up to the explorers, whoever they may be, whether they're Columbus, whether they were Magellan, whether they were Cabot, whether they were Lewis and Clark, whoever they may be throughout the history of our planet. There were these peoples who, in a way, it mirrors our ancestors, the ones that came over from the old country and said, I'm going to go to a new land because I just want to see what's out there. So, I mean, Columbus did that. I mean, he obviously got the Nina de Pinta, the Santa Maria. It was this very Italian thing. He came here. You have Columbus. You had Amerigo Vespucci, who the countries were named after. So, I mean, this was part of the history. Now, look, if you dig deep enough, I think in any person's background, whoever it may be, you're going to find something that may say, well, you know what, he did this. He kicked his dog somewhere along the line, or did this, or he was not a great person because of that. I don't think that aspect of a person should necessarily diminish the major thing that they accomplished in their lives. Again, it goes back to education. I think long as all that information is out there, then you make the decision, okay, do we really feel, because even look at our presidencies from now back through history. If you dig into the real lives of every single one of them, you're going to find all kinds of things that you may not be necessarily proud of, but does that necessarily diminish what the accomplishments they made? So it's an interesting debate, and one that, you know, long as it's open for discussion is fine. But I don't think you can make a blanket statement of like, oh, we just found out that this guy did this, and this, so let's do that because of it. Let's erase. You're almost like erasing their existence, and I think that's not right. That's just we're all human, you know.
What a beautiful, well thought out answer. Joe Mantegna for president.
I don't know about that.
Hey, you know, funny you should say that, Lisa, because I'm pretty confident in this. Let's make note that we have yet to have had an Italian-American president in this country, okay? At least anyone who identifies that way. And I find that to be extraordinary when you're listening to arguments with respect to quotas and how many people.
Absolutely right. I've said that for the longest time. I remember even when there were times when Italian Americans got close to maybe even, and even when Barack Obama was elected, whenever I was saying to myself, I said, you know what, this is wonderful. We have an African American as president, but in a way, I thought it's probably going to be more difficult to get an Italian American as president than an African American, just because of having to fight some of those, just what we've been talking about, those.
Joe, let me pick up on that a little bit. You have been a great supporter of us. I'd like to know why. First of all, we always appreciate you at the Neelas. You do a great job. But what is it? I didn't expect to go to this conversation, but is it the fact that I've heard Italians explain it, well, we don't band together. We don't try to politically use muscle to get positions, but yet when we represent such a large statistical population in this country, the idea that an Italian is not a feasible candidate for a presidency or high-level positions is what's going on there? Is it us? Are we at fault?
No, I just think, you know, I think we just have to overcome hundreds and hundreds of years of ingrained kinds of feelings about that. Look, I mean, you know, there was always, you know, at one time we were, you know, like they say, there used to be signs in people's window that said Nina, you know, no Italians need apply, right? This has happened to probably every nationality. It would happen with the Asians, it would happen with the Jews, it would happen with the, and then until those people became ingrained within the society, wherever it may be, and in this case, America, then it becomes all of a sudden you go to the next lower denominator, the next bunch of new guys who came in, and there's a certain prejudice built in. Now this one, again, I mean, things sometimes just take a long time for them to, you know, change or dissolve or morph into what the reality is. But all I could say is I think things are getting better and better, and we move forward in this respect, just like we've done it with all kinds of, whether it's racial relations, everything. Like we're going through a turbulent time right now, obviously, especially with the whole racial thing that's been happening. But, you know, I grew up through the 60s. We had a very similar thing happen then. It was very turbulent. When the dust settled, we did move forward a bit. Not enough, but somewhat. It's going to happen again now. We're going to move forward. We're going to learn from this. There's going to be, people are going to be a little more tolerant, a little more understanding of like, hey, you know, we're all we're all bringing something to the table. We're all a little different in our own way. But so not just Black Lives Matter, we also have to understand everybody's lives matter. You know, Black Lives Matter, Italian lives matter, Irish lives matter, Catholic lives matter, Jewish lives matter, Muslim lives matter. And so I think that's happening. That's starting to happen more and more. And that's evolution, you know. Beyond that, you know, I don't know. If there was a simple answer, we'd all have it and everything would be hunky-dory.
Right.
Justin, I know we have many questions from the audience.
Well, no surprise here, Joe. Your reach is far and broad. We're getting hellos and shout outs and from all over the country, even in Italy. So I think no one is surprised with that. And the range of questions are, you know, are pretty broad as well. We had an interesting one come through. What is your favorite character or project that you've ever been or worked on?
Yeah, you know, that's almost impossible. I realize this is my 50th year, actually my 51st year as a professional actor, 2020. And so I've been doing this a long time. And again, I feel blessed to have had the career I've had, because I mean, I get it. I live a fantasy life in the sense that if you ask people across the planet, hey, what would you like to, if you could pick a job and you can be it, what would it be? And I remember there was always a saying that said, the best jobs were either to be a professional athlete, to be a professional musician, or to be an astronaut, or be an actor. And the answer was an actor was the best because you could play any of the other professions, whatever it may be. And that's why I feel lucky to be able to say that. So I've played such a myriad of roles in my career. But I will say, a lot of not just because, you know, we're talking through this Italian-American organization today, but the fact that I got to play Dean Martin, who was an idol. I idolized him as a kid. I was almost afraid to take that role on, but I did a lot of research on it. And because of it, I got to be close to the Martin family, got to know, especially his daughter, Dina, who's become a dear friend. Playing Dean Martin was a big thing for me. And to play a lot of the Italian-American characters that I played in my career, like Ricky Roma, where I won a Tony Award, and Glengarry Glen Ross. To do 13 seasons of Criminal Minds playing David Rossi, another Italian-American. But there is no one, you know, I couldn't say, oh, this is the one. Again, like I said, I've been fortunate to have a job where I've played, you know, hundreds and hundreds of different people in my career. And every one of them has a certain memory. And I've done a lot of films in Italy. I've probably done 4 or 5 films in Italy. So I've played everything from a Renaissance painter, Pontormo, to you know, the other characters, including in Godfather 3 and other movies in between.
Awesome. Well, to build off of that question, we had Vince DiGregorio write in from South Philly. And he was wondering, you know, you mentioned that you're on a new Amazon series. He was wondering how these new platforms kind of change how, you know, maybe as an actor, director, producer, kind of from that end, you know, from the traditional maybe network TV, how does that look from your end? What has changed?
You know, from my end, not much. In other words, and it never changed, even from the difference when I used to mainly do motion pictures and then did television. There's no change, because basically I stand there's a camera out here, and they say action, and I do what I do, and they say cut. Then where it winds up, I have no control over. And whether it's on a screen that's, you know, a huge screen in a, you know, in a Cinerama dome, or whether nowadays, you know, probably my daughter has seen half of my stuff on her phone. You know, I mean, like they'll look at it on their telephone. So there's no difference in what I do. You know, and the medium has constantly changed. But that's okay. I mean, that's just the way of the world. That's technology. But there's really no difference in that aspect of it. There's a big difference between doing live theater and doing stuff on film and television, but not really in how I do it. It's just a different kind of environment, different sensibility, that's all.
Interesting. Well, I think our final guest, our final viewer question is not actor related at all, but instead, you know, you're from Chicago, you're a big Cubs fan. They just announced the possibility of the baseball season starting. Can the Cubs do it this year?
Well, I'm so glad they at least did it once. And, it's funny, again, as I said, my mother passed away at 101. When she was 90, when she was 100, was the year that they finally won after. And I remember I did an interview at the time when it looks like they were getting close to winning that year. And they asked me about, what do you think about the Cubs getting so close? I said, look, my mother's 100. The Cubs were on a 7-year losing streak when she was born, which was true because that had been 108 years, I guess, since they had won. And then they won that year. And then my mother passed away a few months later. And I thought, okay, at least my mom got to see them win one. So I can't be too greedy. I mean, look, it took them to, I'm 72 and it took me that long to finally see the Cubs win a World Series. If they never win another one, I could at least say, okay, it wasn't as, they got there. So we'll see. But I'm just glad baseball's coming back.
Hey, and just to keep on the sports vein, I saw you made an appearance during The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary.
Yeah. It's funny, being from Chicago, I did have a chance to know Michael a little bit. I actually hosted a charity fundraiser for his organization, his charity, one year when I was shooting the movie Baby's Day Out in Chicago back sometime in the 90s. And so yeah, I was even surprised myself. I remember I did that interview for them. I didn't know how they were going to use it. I didn't even know what it was going to be about. They said, "Oh, we're doing this documentary on Michael Jordan. One telling us a story," and I did. And of course, I got so many phone calls that day when that episode aired. It's like, "Hey man, you're on the Last Dance." I said, "Oh, okay." But that was fun.
Hey, Joe, I have two questions for you. One, is it true to the rumor that you helped sing or lead the singing of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" with the Cubs? And is that true?
Oh yeah, I've done it. Whenever you throw, they give you the option. You throw out the first pitch and they always call you to sing the "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" at 7th inning stretch. And if you also want to throw out the first pitch, and I always say yes. So I've done it maybe 12, 13, 14 times over the course of my career. So yeah, I would have done it this year. I was supposed to do it in early June. But yeah, I do it every year.
Do you find any pressure trying to throw the strike?
Oh, I find a lot of pressure. And a couple of times I knocked it into the dirt. I will say that, but I had a good tip from, I had two tips. One was a good tip, one was a funny tip. The good tip was throw it higher than you think you have to because you're on a mound, because I throw it from the mound. And people get up there and think, oh, I'll just throw it fast. But you're throwing down, you're on a mound, so it's going down. So that's why people get in the dirt. So I always now throw it on a lot of arc. It takes a week for it to get there, but at least the guy catches it. But the first time I ever did it, I remember I walked out to the mound and the Cubs had a pitcher named Mitch. I can't think of his last name, but he was like, he had a reputation for being crazy. In other words, they always said he pitches like his hair's on fire. Mitch Williams, I think his name was. And I walked out to the mound. I'm nervous as hell. I says, "Hey, Mitch, you got any tips?" And he goes, "Oh, hell, just throw it hard as you can and hope to hit a corner." And I thought, okay, that kind of summed it up. That summed up his pitching style anyway. But
Joe, I think maybe a lot of people would like to know this. It's certainly something being interesting to me. What do you do with those nerves? I imagine that anytime you're going to be doing a performance or going out and the public is looking at you, how do you control that in your mind? And was it ever a problem for you that you had to overcome, like a lot of actors?
Well, yes, there's always a degree of nervousness, I think, in anything people do. I think if I had to put it in one word in terms of dealing with nervousness, the word would be preparation. In other words, if you're about to face something and it's causing you some sort of nervousness, I think 99% of the time it's based on preparation or lack of it. So in other words, if you're about to do something, and then, I'll give you an instance. Again, talking about when I was going to shooting the movie The Godfather 3. I was about to shoot my very first scene, and I'm up there, and I'm looking, and they're about to say action. So I'm about to say my very first line in the movie. That's this iconic film. And I'm looking, and here's Al Pacino standing there. Here's Francis Ford Coppola over here. I start to feel a little bit of nervousness in me. And as I thought about it, I thought, but wait a minute. I've been acting since I was in high school. It's like, in other words, it's like the Little League. That's where I started. And then from high school, I went on to this, and then I went on to that. And I've been doing this now for, at that point, maybe 25 years. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, there's a reason I got chosen to do this. They think that I'm the guy to do this. People like Francis Ford Coppola, one of the world's greatest directors, thinks I'm the guy to play this part. What the hell am I nervous about? It's like a ball player finally getting up there, started in Little League and now he's at bat in the majors in, let's say, Yankee Stadium or Wrigley Field. You feel nervous, but then at the next instant you say to yourself, no, you know what? I'm prepared for this. This is what I've been working toward my whole life. Let me show you what I got. And then you do it. And so when you find yourself in those times of nervousness, if it's based on your preparedness, then if you need more preparation, maybe you should stop and say, wait a minute, I need to work on this a little more. And then go at it. But don't be afraid of that nervousness. Sometimes that little degree of nervousness is good. It gives you that little thing.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We can talk for hours. I mean, between you and me, Bob, we talk for hours anyway. But now we have Joe in the mix. This was so fun. Can I leave you with another word of advice when you throw out the pitch again for the Cubs?
Yeah.
So Derek Jeter gave this word of advice to George W. Bush. You might have heard this when he threw out the first pitch in the 2001 World Series.
Right.
Make sure it doesn't bounce in the dirt.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. I'm well aware of that, and I've had a few boos when that's happened. But I learned. That's why I always realize now. If you saw it the very last time I did it at Wrigley Field, like I said, it probably took about a half an hour for the ball to get there, but it was nice and high, and the catcher caught it like right about up here.
Yeah.
I thought, great,
Well, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Justin, before we go, I know you want to share some information for people that might want to join the organization.
Absolutely. If you're interested in celebrating your heritage, head to osia.org and become a member of the Order Sons and Daughters of Italy in America. And please also throw a like onto all of our social media platforms. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So head over to those platforms and make sure that you throw a like. And like I said, if you're interested in joining, please head to our website, osia.org.
Thank you, Justin. And thank you so much, Joe. This was so much fun. We look forward to seeing you at NELA, hopefully in 2021.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you. And we'll see everybody